I'm sorry. I never should have flown that drone.
I never thought a forest could turn against me, but that October evening in the Cascades proved me wrong. Susie and I had been walking since dawn, threading through an old growth cathedral where the trunks stretched so high they seemed to erase the sky. The ground was soft with moss that swallowed every step, like the forest wanted to muffle our presence. For hours the only sounds were the rhythmic scrape of our boots, the steady breath between us, and the occasional raven wheeling above. It felt ancient, untouched, the kind of place where the past clings like damp air. We'd chosen this section precisely because it was remote. 12 miles from the nearest logging road, no official trail, just deer paths that twisted in ways maps refused to explain. I loved places like this. Solitude makes the air taste sharper, and the deeper you go, the more the world outside feels like a dream. I'd been bringing a drone on my trips for years, capturing aerial footage that always made me feel like I'd stolen a view from another world. Susie humored me, rolling her eyes at the extra weight in my pack. But when the drone rose above the canopy, she always leaned close to watch the tiny screen. That first day went smoothly. We found water, a clearing by a creek, and enough open space to launch the drone. As the sun lowered, I sent it climbing, my thumb feathering the controls with the ease of repetition. The display bloomed with endless green, ridges folding into ridges, a horizon of trees unbroken by roads or rooftops. Then movement. At first it was just a dark stitch between the branches, a trick of light, I told myself, until it lengthened, straightened, and revealed a form walking upright. Susie's hand gripped my shoulder. On the monitor, half a mile away, a figure advanced with purpose. Too tall for a man, too broad. Its arms swung lower than any human frame allowed. The drone's camera struggled to follow as the canopy broke it apart, now a shoulder, now a head, now nothing but shadow again. I tightened my focus and caught 3 full strides. It moved with a smooth power, each step carrying it forward, as though the earth tilted to serve it. My throat dried. This wasn't an elk rearing, wasn't a hiker in dark gear. The proportions defied every category I knew. We watched in silence until the figure disappeared completely into the tree line. I widened the drone's orbit, desperate to relocate it. But the screen showed only forest, nothing but endless green swallowing everything. When I brought the drone back down, Susie didn't speak. She just stared at the little machine in my hands like it had delivered a message we weren't meant to receive. I should have stopped there, should have told myself it was fatigue, perspective, or the tricks of dusk. But the footage sat fresh on that micro SD card in my pocket, undeniable, sharp, a wound of truth that bled into every thought. I felt torn open by it. Darkness fell, and with it came the decision I still regret. Curiosity won. I packed a smaller bag with flashlights and water. Susie hesitated but followed. Together we stepped back into the trees, chasing a shadow I wasn't sure I wanted to see again. The night forest is not the day forest. Flashlight beams carved narrow tunnels of clarity, but everything beyond them swelled with menace. Every rustle seemed deliberate. The wind leaned through branches, like a whispered warning we couldn't decipher. For 2 hours we walked, our steps crunching through leaves that smelled of rain and decay. Then we found it, a corridor pressed through the trees, a trail that didn't belong to deer or bear. Something large had been passing here regularly. The earth was worn, the bark along trunks scarred higher than my head. And then, 50 yards from the path, a crude shelter of interlocked branches, too precise to be an accident, big enough for something enormous to crouch inside. I shined the light on it, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw the wood tremble, as if it had only just been abandoned. A chill crawled through me. The ground pulsed like it missed a heartbeat. We argued in hushed tones. Should we go closer or leave? The forest gave no answer, only a silence that felt layered, like sound itself had been folded away. We turned back, but the trail had doubled on itself, splitting in directions we didn't remember. Somewhere along the walk, the compass of memory failed us. Lost became the only word that fit. We decided to hunker down in a clearing, wrapping ourselves in emergency blankets that crinkled like brittle leaves. Sleep was impossible. Fear had erased the idea. Hours stretched long. Then, from the trees, a growl, deep, resonant, not from one throat, but many. It circled us, shifting places faster than we could turn our lights. I swept my beam left. Silence. I turned right. Silence again. And in those silences, the hair along my neck rose higher than in the growls themselves. Shapes began to stir at the edges of vision. Upright, massive, stepping between trunks like shadows, stepping out of shadows. Each time I tried to focus, they dissolved back into the dark, leaving only the memory of movement. There were at least 3, maybe 4. They didn't charge. They didn't attack. They just watched, circling, rehearsing something I couldn't name. The wilderness had grown muscle. By 4 a.m., one shape edged closer, its outline sharper, no longer content with distance. Susie clutched my arm so tightly my skin bruised. I knew then that we couldn't just sit and wait. Survival screamed through my veins. We ran. Branches whipped my face, roots clawed my ankles, the forest erupting around us in a chaos of noise. Behind us, things moved, not crashing like beasts, but driving us with intent, hurting us like prey. I knew then they weren't merely large animals. They had strategy, they had coordination, and we had stumbled into the middle of it. Somewhere in the madness of flight, I realized the most terrifying truth. They could catch us at any moment, but they chose not to. And that question has never stopped gnawing at me. When we finally stopped running, my chest felt like it was caving in, every breath tearing through me like broken glass. We collapsed between 2 cedar trunks, so massive they felt like prison, bars we'd willingly locked ourselves behind. Susie buried her face against her knees, shaking, whispering prayers under her breath that didn't sound like her. I kept my light off, clutching it in my hand as though the beam itself would betray us. At first there was nothing but the roar of my pulse. Then movement. Heavy, deliberate steps pressing through the underbrush. Not frantic, not confused. They weren't searching. They knew exactly where we were. The ground trembled in small pulses, as if weight was shifting carefully, circling us. My ears strained for sound, but they were masters of silence. I'd hear a branch snap to the left, then nothing. Then a faint exhale from the right. They were orchestrating fear, pulling it through us like a stringed instrument. Susie grabbed my arm, nails biting through my jacket. She mouthed the word "why," but no sound came out. I couldn't answer her. I didn't know. If they wanted to kill us, it would have been done already. Instead, they stalked us with the patience of something that understood our terror as a tool. Minutes stretched into hours. Every shift of wind, every creak of bark, my mind sharpened into claws of paranoia. Then, just as the black sky softened toward gray, everything stopped. No growls, no steps, no shifting forms between the trees. The forest exhaled like it had decided to forgive us. Birds began to call. An owl hooted far off, returning the rhythm of ordinary wilderness. The nightmare had melted into morning. We rose on stiff legs, too afraid to believe the reprieve was real. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, but it felt weak, like light trying to push through a dirty window. We found a stream, followed it until it branched into a creek I recognized, and at last stumbled back into our camp. The sight froze me where I stood. Our tent was shredded, sleeping bags ripped open, their down fillings scattered in the mud like snowfall that didn't belong. Food wrappers torn apart, but the food itself left untouched. Uneaten, almost inspected, and my drone, or what was left of it, lay broken into fragments across the clearing. The camera had been wrenched from its mount. The gimbal bent like twisted bone. It wasn't clumsy destruction. It was surgical. Whoever, whatever, had done it knew exactly what needed to be destroyed. But they hadn't found the card. That tiny plastic square pressed in my jacket pocket felt heavier than stone. Proof survived, but everything else had been erased. Susie whispered that we should leave, her voice cracked raw. I agreed, though part of me still wanted to study the ruins, to understand the message they had left. But that was exactly it. This wasn't chaos. It was a message. They wanted us to know they'd been there. They wanted us to feel powerless. They hadn't just attacked our camp. They had dissected it, as though demonstrating that nothing we built, nothing we trusted was beyond their reach. The hike out was a blur of exhaustion and dread. Every hour felt stretched thin. Even when the trail began to look familiar, I never trusted it. Shadows followed. The woods seemed to pulse with memory, as if the night itself had burned an afterimage into the trees. Susie cried once, quietly, and I couldn't find words to comfort her. My only focus was forward, forward, always forward, until the forest finally opened into the gravel lot where our car waited. Like a miracle, we collapsed inside, doors locked, though I knew locks meant nothing out there. For a long time, neither of us spoke. My hands trembled against the wheel. The silence wasn't relief, it was shock, the kind that hollows you out. Back home, the world felt counterfeit. Cell service, city streets, the hum of refrigerators, it all rang false. Like we'd stepped onto a stage, built to distract us from the truth that lived in the woods. I uploaded the footage, my fingers shaking as I slid the card into the reader. And there it was, the figure in crisp clarity, each stride captured in pixels that left no room for doubt. The shoulders rolling with hidden strength, the arms swinging longer than human proportion should allow, the head turning slightly as though it already knew we were watching. Watching the footage didn't bring relief. It brought weight, the kind that settles on your chest and refuses to leave. I felt like I was holding dynamite with no idea what would happen if I lit it. Proof was power, but it was also danger. Who should see this? Who could? Susie didn't want me to show anyone. She said the more people knew, the more attention it would bring, and attention was exactly what those things had tried to erase. She was right, but keeping it secret felt impossible. Every frame gnawed at me. It wasn't just evidence of something strange. It was a glimpse into something organized, intelligent, and maybe older than us. And if they could destroy the drone, dismantle it with precision, stalk us without harm, then they understood us more than we understood them. Nights became the worst. I'd wake to shadows shifting outside my window, convinced I'd hear heavy steps in the yard. Sometimes when I closed my eyes, I'd see the shapes circling us in the forest, massive outlines slipping between trees, like smoke caught in branches. The fear followed me, sticky, permanent, like sap clinging to skin. And one question burned sharper than the rest. If they didn't kill us when they could, then what did they want from us instead? Because the way they moved, the way they hunted without striking, felt less like mercy and more like rehearsal. The weeks that followed blurred together, though I remember them not by dates but by absences. Sleep became thin, brittle. Food lost its taste. Every time I closed my eyes, I returned to the forest, the circle of trees, the growls that moved like a current around us, the silhouettes threading the dark. But it wasn't just memory. The experience seemed to bleed outward, staining even the quiet corners of daily life. Walking through town, I'd catch myself scanning rooftops and alleys as if something might be waiting. At night, headlights sliding across my bedroom wall looked less like cars and more like the slow arc of a flashlight beam. And worst of all, silence was no longer peace. Silence was pressure, the same suffocating weight I'd felt in the Cascades when the growls paused and the forest turned inward on itself. The footage didn't help. I watched it more times than I'll admit, pausing frame by frame, searching for anything I'd missed. The figure was there, undeniable, walking with the confidence of something that belonged more than I ever could. And yet each viewing left me emptier, like staring into an unanswered riddle. He didn't find a clue, he found an absence. One night, maybe a month after we escaped, I sat alone, replaying it again. Susie had stopped watching, refused even to be in the same room when I loaded the file. She said the sound of the drone made her sick now. I didn't blame her, but I couldn't stop. I froze the video on a single frame, the creature mid-stride, shoulders hunched in motion. And as I leaned closer, something inside me shifted. It wasn't fear, it was recognition, not of the thing itself, but of the way it moved, as though it wasn't avoiding the camera, but allowing itself to be seen. That thought gutted me, because if true, then the footage wasn't proof I'd stolen. It was proof they had given. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself the mind invents patterns when overwhelmed. But then came the sounds. It started small, a thud outside the house late at night, the sound of garbage cans shifting, though nothing was ever knocked over. Once I woke to a low vibration, like a truck idling outside, except when I checked the street it was empty. Another time, Susie swore she heard something scraping across the siding of the house, slow and deliberate. I found faint marks in the paint the next morning. 3 long lines raked diagonally. Too high for any stray dog, too precise for accident. We argued constantly. Susie wanted to move, to vanish into a city where the noise of humanity could drown whatever followed us. I couldn't leave, not while the footage existed. She said I was clinging to the very thing that had cursed us. Maybe she was right, but obsession is a stubborn parasite, and mine had dug deep. One night in December, I tried to prove her wrong. I told her we'd go for a simple hike, just a short loop in a state park filled with joggers and dog walkers, a safe place. She resisted, but finally agreed. For 2 hours we walked beneath ordinary pines, the laughter of children echoing faintly from a picnic area. It should have been easy. It should have healed something. But halfway along the loop, the atmosphere changed. The chatter of birds cut off mid-note. The wind dropped like someone had sealed the sky. The trees blocked the sun like they had something to hide. Susie froze, her face pale, and I knew before I admitted it, the silence wasn't natural. It was them. I scanned the tree line and saw nothing. But the stillness itself was a presence, pressing against my skin like static before lightning. Susie grabbed my hand, pulling me back toward the parking lot, and I didn't argue. We nearly ran, and only when the hum of cars returned did the world feel real again. That night she told me she was done. No more hikes, no more camping, no more chasing shadows. If I wanted to keep feeding this obsession, she wouldn't follow. I wanted to argue, but the truth hung heavy between us. I'd already lost part of her in that forest, and now I was losing the rest. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, asking myself the same question, over and over. What if they hadn't just been circling us that night? What if they had been marking us? Because sometimes, even now, I swear I see them. Not fully, never fully, but in fragments. A tall shape slipping between parked cars at dusk. A shadow across the trail when no one else is near. A reflection in a window that doesn't match my own. Always at the edge of vision. Always gone the second I turn. And in those moments, one thought claws through me with unbearable clarity. Maybe we didn't escape the forest at all. Maybe the forest came with us. I don't know when fear turned into fixation, only that the line between the two dissolved like mist. At first, I told myself it was about understanding, about proof, about showing the world what I had seen. But the longer the footage sat on my desk, the more it began to feel like a tether, not from me to the truth, but from them to me. I tried sharing it online in fragments, small clips that blurred detail but hinted at scale. The responses ranged from awe to ridicule. Some called it the clearest evidence ever captured. Others dismissed it as CGI or costume play. I stopped caring about their opinions. What mattered was the silence from the forest itself. Because after those nights of scraping sounds and shifting shadows, there came a pause, a lull, weeks with nothing unusual. No noises outside, no figures at the edge of vision, no sense of being watched. Most people would have felt relief. To me, it felt worse. Absence was not safety. Absence was planning. Sometimes when I lay awake, I replayed our final night in the Cascades, the circling growls, the coordinated movements, the way they drove us away from the drone. It wasn't random. It wasn't animal instinct. It was strategy. That thought festered until I began to wonder whether we had been part of something rehearsed, a ritual, a warning, or maybe a test. Susie doesn't like to talk about it anymore. She avoids the subject entirely, as if words themselves might summon them back. Our relationship is quieter now, thinner, stretched by something neither of us can repair. She has nightmares she won't describe. Sometimes she looks at me like I'm the one who led them into our lives. And maybe she's right. The footage still exists. I keep the card in a fireproof box, hidden inside a drawer. I've considered destroying it, but every time I hold it, my hand trembles with indecision. Because if they went so far to erase evidence, maybe keeping it is more dangerous than letting it spread. But destroying it feels like surrender. And maybe that's exactly what they want. I've started hearing things again. Not the growls this time, but faint knocks in the walls when the house is still. Once, as I stood at the sink, the backyard motion light flicked on, flooding the trees beyond the fence. Nothing moved, nothing visible, but I felt the same electric hum in my chest that I had in the forest. A vibration that told me, you're not alone. The forest gave me more than proof that night. It gave me a shadow I can't outrun. Proof sits in plastic on my desk, but presence lives in me. It lingers in the corners of vision, in the pauses between sounds, in the weight of silence pressing down when the world should be alive. Sometimes I wonder if the footage wasn't stolen at all. Maybe it was bait, a lure designed to draw me into their gaze. If that's true, then destroying the card won't change anything. Because the moment I lifted that drone into the sky, the moment the lens caught them moving across the canopy, I was already chosen. And now, every time I walk beneath trees, whether in a crowded park or a stretch of roadside pines, I feel it again, the sense of being measured, weighed, studied. Like something enormous is waiting just beyond sight, patient enough to let me believe I'm safe, knowing I'll never be. The world has rules we're taught to trust. What is human? What is animal? What belongs in daylight and what doesn't? But in that Oregon forest, those rules tore like fabric and I saw through the rib. What stared back wasn't chaos. It was order, deliberate, and terrifying. And the question that haunts me now, louder than the memory of growls, sharper than the image on that screen, is this: if they let me live, was it mercy, or was it permission? Because some nights when the wind dies and the house creaks, I feel certain of one thing. They're not finished with me.